Welcome, everyone to Rad Talk. This is our 12th episode. I'm Dennis.
And I'm Gage. And in today's episode, we got, I think might be my favorite one, at least, on paper, what we have to talk about. So, the people that have been listening, we've only been doing this for, what, 2 months, maybe 2.5 months.
Something like that, yeah.
And when you see everybody tries to make their own podcast and, like, oh, you and I thought, oh, let's do it. What do we have to lose? But then you get into it and you're like, you start running into obstacles and things that you just weren't prepared for. And so we kind of looked for other people that have been doing podcasts in general. And then we also looked at people that were in our lane, which is, if you just classify it as medical, not radiology, there's not too many of those. But if you just look at medical, and you were more familiar with this person than I was vaguely familiar, but you were like, you showed me, I think it was a couple months ago, you showed me one of his videos and I was like, oh, this is interesting. He has the same vibe that I do in, towards medicine.
Mhm.
So I was like, I listened to some of his stuff and eventually, I don't know what clicked, but I was like, man, we should email this guy and see if he has any kind of, advice for us. So if you guys are familiar with medical podcasts, then he's one of the more popular, but his name is Z. He goes by Z Dog, but he's a hospitalist out of, I think, Stanford. But yeah, and his content is he uses like humor and sarcasm to kind of shit on medicine essentially, because he's very open about how medicine changed him and affected him. And I'm like, oh man, that's kind of what, at least the vibe that I'm going for, because we've mentioned several times that we don't really enjoy our jobs. So we're like, man, he kind of does what we do. We're like, man, what if he has any advice for us? So I said, what do we have to lose? And I was like, let's just email him.
Well, I think, and he has his Doc Vader thing, so he
Yeah.
kind of like spoofs different things.
Yeah.
He's a really artsy guy. He does a lot of broken areas of medicine that he digs into and says like this should be fixed, and he just goes at it. And so I really agree with like broken parts of medicine that need fixed. That so he kind of like resonated with us, I think.
hmm And he does it in a creative way. He's not just like outright just telling people what's wrong. It's like you said, the Doc Vader thing was,
Mhm.
it's a recurring character. So it's pretty interesting. But the bottom line is I was like, let's just email him.
Mhm.
So, I drafted up an email. I said, here's who we are. We're only 11 episodes deep. We don't have like the greatest gear. I was just very open and honest with him. And I made sure to mention that I was in radiology because I know he's mentioned before that his wife is in radiology. And he mentioned, uh, I think she's a program director for radiology residency at Stanford. So I kind of threw a jab in there, like, because his personality he's very open and you can joke with him. I think I just sent a jab in the email that said radiology was better than medicine. And in his response, he kind of opened up with that his wife kind of jokes, that radiology is better than medicine with him. So I felt like that was a good start to the email because he kind of showed that he's just like
Better,
normal.
better than medicine, or better than being like a hospitalist, or better
Yeah,
than
sorry, I say medicine. I mean internal medicine, a
internal medicine.
hospitalist. Yeah, so yeah, I'm sure his mom or his wife does. I would if my spouse was in internal any other specialty, but so I kind of just emailed him and said, "Hey, here's our situation. I think you and our podcasts are similar because we're kind of medicine has kind of worn us out a little bit." He's like, and I was like, "Do you have any just basic advice
Right.
for us?" And I don't know what were your expectations? Did you think he would even respond?
I wasn't sure. I know you guys are seem to be cut from the same cloth. In
You mean
that
me and him, or just
you and
doctors in
him, yeah,
general?
you and him,
Yeah, yeah.
very very much so. And I had a feeling he may respond, just because I've seen him respond to other folks that I've watched on videos, and he actually
Mhm.
responded to a friend of mine who had made a video and like answered her question on his video. So I know he's very intertwined with his subscribers, and especially the people that have followed him for a while. He answers questions, and he's in tune with that kind of thing. So I was like, okay, if anybody's gonna like, if we reach out to anybody, he might be a person that legit is gonna like give us good advice. And so
Mhm.
when you were like, I think we should do this, I was like, I think we got a shot here. And so even though us being as new as we are, I didn't think that after reading the email, I didn't think that we would have gotten the great
Yeah.
uh, stuff that we got. But
Yeah.
I'll let you kind of carve that out for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm the same. I honestly didn't know. I don't think a lot of these people will respond if we ever, I mean, because we have like a list of other people. We were like, oh man, we should just, it's just like a Hail Mary. We mentioned in the first episode of who we wanted on the podcast. Like if we emailed them, like Blink 182 or Post, like they're not going to respond. I kind of lumped, even though Z Dog's not as popular as them, I'm like, he's popular enough. I don't think he responds to people that are. I told him how many Instagram followers we had. We only have 11 episodes. I'm like, there's no way this man is going to waste his time. But
Right.
we wouldn't be talking about it if he didn't respond. So he did. He did respond, and it was actually fairly quick. I think I emailed him on Sunday. He responded on Monday, so it was very quick. But and his what I we have preached over and over that came through in his email, which is one reason I like him. I think is he was just authentic. He was kind of just himself. I didn't mention in my email I cussed because he cusses in his videos and stuff. I'm like, so I'm just like I'm just going to be myself and throw some cuss words in and all that
Mhm,
kind of stuff. And then he cussed in the response, which I
mhm,
I appreciated. But
mhm,
I told you he opened up with his wife takes shots at him for being internal medicine. But other than that, he kind of mentions that he appreciates because I linked our I put our Apple podcast link, thinking,
mhm.
man, maybe he'll listen five
Sure.
minutes or something. So he says that he likes our authenticity, right?
Mm,
And he mentioned cussing specifically because
okay.
he said it added to our authenticity.
Yeah.
So, but that response made me realize that he actually listened to at least some of one of our episodes. He wouldn't know that we cussed if he didn't listen to
Mhm,
our either
mhm.
our social media or our episode. So I
Yeah.
thought that was, even though you're just giving the advice of just be yourself, is essentially what he's saying. He took the time to listen to the stuff that we put out so far.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting.
Which is meaningful. Like you appreciate, he's been doing this for a long time, and you can go back and look at his old videos of where he started out with
Yeah.
the bad sound quality
Yeah.
and things like that. And so for him to just take a couple minutes of his time to kind of give these nobodies like a
Hmm.
listen and say, hey, like I appreciate that you guys are authentic. I see that like, cussing is part of your language or however you speak or whatever
Hmm.
it is. Like just keep doing whatever you're doing and like the grind and like I appreciated all of it. So
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's very generic, but at least it takes
mhm.
he took the time to listen, and he's like, yeah, just keep going. Cause he
Yeah.
goes on to mention that radiologists is a very niche audience, right? We're very cornered in what we do because not very many people do it or know about it. But then he goes, I'm assuming he's listened to other podcasts because he goes on to say that some of them they're kind of just like they say a lot without saying a lot, essentially. So he's like, you need to keep being authentic and being yourself and kind of saying things that maybe other people are thinking but they don't want to say out loud, because in the third paragraph he's like, you're gonna piss off some people, but he's like, why not do it now when nobody's listening? That
Mhm,
way you're just kind of used to it whenever
mhm,
you do get a following. So I thought that advice to me was maybe the most interesting part of the whole thing, because I never thought about
mhm.
that. Like we can say we haven't said anything terrible controversial, but he's like, that makes sense, like now's the time to do it because nobody's listening, or
Right.
very few people are listening, whatever. But
Right, right. Yeah, say what you wanna say. People are gonna, dislike you for your opinions.
hmm.
Everybody has opinions. Everybody's opinions are different,
Yeah.
from person to person, and, like, that's okay. Just say how you feel, say what you think, and find your crowd, find your audience, that has similar opinions or wants to listen to a different opinion, and so it's,
Yeah. And I
and
thought, at least for me, ultrasound is a little different. I think techs in general have a little bit more exposure on social media and stuff like that. So people are more aware of like a tech's personality and like things
Mhm.
of that nature. Most people don't know a radiologist personality. If they do, they think we're just nerds that sit in like a dark room. Like, frankly, they just think we're nerds that sit in a dark room that love. I mean, we'll do a react video. Even his Bitmoji or
Yeah.
whatever the radiology emoji, he mentions we love electrons and protons and magnets. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what the average person thinks of us when it's just not completely. which is not true. Some people are like that, but I think the vast majority are just normal human beings that have, our own personalities. We're not
Yeah.
defined by our jobs. So I think for me, part of doing what we do is at least letting people know, like, if I would never suggest it, but if you are interested in medicine and you want to do radiology, we're not these like quiet bookworm nerds that just sit in dark rooms. So
I mean, I know you a lot. You've really been changing out your pocket protectors quite a bit, and
yeah, yeah,
trying
it's,
to
yeah.
trying to
So
figure out. Yeah.
because I mean, even in medicine, like I said, techs have more exposure. Even in medicine, other doctors have more exposure. Everyone knows about surgeons. I think even internal medicine gets more exposure. OB is a really popular one on like social media, so that you get to see the lifestyle. And granted, our day-to-day job is not very interesting because we do sit at a computer for most of it. But I still think there are other aspects of a radiologist personality that people would enjoy. So that was a big factor for me in wanting to do, this podcast. Besides hating my job, that I wanted people to know that there are,
Hmm.
we have personality.
Right. And even in parts of ultrasound, everybody thinks that it's OB oriented, and so
Hmm.
a lot of people get into ultrasound just because they want to just do OB, and then you realize that there's a lot of aspects to it, and so yeah, okay.
So
It's like
it's good to just bring a little exposure.
yeah.
And then the last part is kind of I mentioned in the podcast, so eventually we want to have guests or be guests on other shows. And
Hmm.
he's like, just make sure you carry the same energy. He's like, don't go on a different podcast and
Good.
completely change who you are and what you say just because you're on a different podcast. He's like, the if you're authentic, people will appreciate it. Kind of like shameless plug here. I did a YouTube video for the Anthony Oliver song. Go check it out on our YouTube, rad_talk_DG. But I think,
Rad reacts.
yeah, I called that Radiologist Reacts. But I think one of the reasons I said it was so popular is just because it was authentic, right? You could tell that it came from somewhere deep inside of him. So I
Hmm.
think he's kind of saying the same thing. People appreciate authenticity, especially in today's day and age where a lot of, people are fake, their bodies
Hmm.
are fake, personalities. I hope, there's just fake stuff everywhere. So I think people do appreciate a little bit of authenticity.
Hmm. Definitely, always, yeah, being real.
Yeah. So I think we have other lists, people we want to email, but I think that was a good one to start with him because he's an authentic dude.
Hmm.
He respond, even if I didn't think he would respond, he did respond. And it wasn't just like a generic templated email that he sends to everybody that responds. So I think overall, I'm glad that we
Hmm.
emailed him and he gave useful advice. We'll put his plug. Is it just ZDog MD?
Yeah,
That's
Z
what
Dog.
he is on.
I think he's across the board. Z Dog
Yeah,
MD.
Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. So go give him a follow.
Yeah, and I think he has a separate I think it's like Doc Vader too. So if you're really into like funny humor, medical,
Yeah. I know
it's
Z Dog is his medical is the one where he does most of it. He also has a personal one where I think
that's good.
he gets a little bit more, I guess, authentic or one on one type of stuff.
Right.
So, but Z Dog MD is the one that I follow.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely. Yeah, I agree.
and then
And then on the other flip of the
yeah,
coin, uh,
yeah,
we were having issues. We tell you guys every week to look us up. We're Rad Talk, and we pop up everywhere Rad Talk is. Well, I started to realize that on Spotify we were not showing up as Rad Talk.
we've been
Um,
lying
so
for fucking two
yeah,
months.
so I was like we show up, but you have to be like very specific. You had to type in Rad Talk, and you had to type in like Gage or Dennis or like something.
And not even that. If you type in Rad Talk, other shit pops up.
Yeah,
Like Raw Talk or
yeah,
there's nothing. It doesn't say there's one podcast above us that says Rad Talk.
yeah.
The
And,
rest aren't even rad, and they're still showing up. I was like, this is bullshit. Like, what are they doing?
and we're gonna surpass that one above us. We're coming.
Easy, yeah.
But so yeah, so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna reach out to Spotify and just say, hey, like, I feel like if people type in Rad Talk, they're searching for us. Like, we should be one of the top folks. And they essentially told me that just like gain a bigger following or have people watch more of your stuff. And
Yeah,
it was kind of frustrating because it's like, well, how I want people to watch more of our stuff, but if you type in our name and it doesn't show up,
yeah,
people aren't gonna like people don't want to just constantly take the extra step to I feel like, okay, I'm gonna type in Red Talk with Dennis or whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
I should come up above raw gear or something that has nothing to do with rad or
I
like
mean,
whatever.
everyone says a name's important. Like you have to know your audience. Like Rad Talk, that's easy. It's 2 words, 7 letters, easy. So the
Yeah.
fact then you have to add in with and then one of our names. People are like,
Yeah.
that's too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
And
fact that
speaking,
Spotify told us to like just get good, that's essentially what they told. That's the most elementary bullshit advice you could ever give some. We weren't even asking that.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
wanted you to change it so we popped up appropriately. And you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, get fucked. Like here's our advice. Jesus Christ, Spotify, come on.
Yeah. Well, and I've since I searched recently and we came up second. And so I don't know if they
So they
made some
listen.
sort of they don't know if they made some sort of a change or if
Yeah.
I just like got lucky this time and I searched for it and it came up. But if anybody continues to look us up and they can't find us, I guess let us know and we'll continue to try to reach out to Spotify
We'll
and get
continue beating our heads against the wall with
that.
Spotify and
Try to keep I'm gonna try to get this bigger. Or maybe just look us on Podbean or Apple if that's the case.
Apple's
Uh,
probably the easiest, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
Because
I guess.
we do pop up Rad Talk. I looked. So we do
Mhm,
pop up Rad Talk. But
yeah,
yeah, so that's the two types of advice. One was
mhm,
good, actually useful,
mhm.
and the other one was like, well, you know what?
Yep.
Not so useful. So
But, and I think in the real world, that's sometimes the advice you get, like, they're just like, "Well, just be better." And you're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Okay." Like,
yeah,
they're like, "How do you do that?" "Just be better."
yeah.
Okay. And so that we'll take that advice and we're gonna
We're
just
gonna be better.
be better.
So when we're huge, we'll look back and say thanks, Spotify, for telling
Thank
us
you
to
for
be
that.
better.
Definitely.
So
Um,
that's our experience with advice over the last 2 weeks.
yeah.
So if you're ever thinking about starting a podcast, just keep that in the memory bank there.
And remember
Those are the two responses you're going to get, right? Either here's what you do, or
mhm, be better.
yep, be better.
Mhm.
So
And so now I know we're kind of flipping the script here, and we're gonna talk about some different things now.
yeah,
Um,
kind of
I'm
still Z. The first one's Z Dog related. I found it on his
mm,
Instagram, I think. But
right.
so we'll go into that one next. But it was in searching or looking up stuff for Z Dog. Obviously, I haven't watched every piece of content he's ever created, but I was like, let me just scroll through some stuff and see what he's got. But
Mhm,
one of them was I don't know if it was like a Q&A or something, but it was a viewer question, and I think it was one of his viewers wanted to know if it was too late for them to go to medical school at the time. I think the person said they were 25 when they asked the question, and I don't remember his word for word response. You can imagine, if you know him, you can imagine what his response was.
mhm,
But I got to thinking about that specific question, and I can answer the med school part, but then you can also we could just apply it to general life.
mhm,
So when they asked it, I'm like, man, you're only 25. I started medical school at 22, so it's not like you're way behind. First of all, also when I did medical school, I mentioned off camera, but we had like full fledged lawyers. So they'd already gone to law school and been practicing for X amount of years. We had engineers. So we had, I think, the oldest med student I was with somewhere in their 50s, I think late 40s, early 50s. So I'm like, it's technically the answer is no, it's never too late
mhm,
to go. You have to understand what you're getting yourself into.
mhm.
But go ahead.
I said I was gonna say I think with him, I thought Zubin, I think he said like, yeah, it's too late. Like it's always just too late.
Yeah.
Like it's not obviously he was joking. Like it's never too late if you want to do something. Like go do it. Like it's not. It's
Yeah.
you put that in your own mind that oh I'm too old. I'm too slow. I can't do it. I don't know how to learn anymore. I don't know how to like if you want to do something, just go do it and don't worry about what anybody else thinks. If you're in there, like Gage said, he's 20, Gage is 22 years old, starting medical school, and he still has
Hmm.
residency, fellowship, all the other things to get through. And he's sitting beside a person who's 50 years old, who maybe is going to be done by the time they're what 60 or so, 60
Hmm.
something. And they start their career at 60, where a lot of people may be retiring or whatever. But if that's what you want, then who cares?
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's what the what's his name? Gary Vee is a big proponent on that.
Mhm,
Of it's any age you can do whatever you want. He's like, when people come up to me and they're like 50 years old, they're like, oh, it's too late, I missed the boat, and he's like, oh, you didn't, it's not too late. I always think of the Joe Rogan quote. He's like, the person's like, I wish I would have started sooner. He's like, well, you fucking didn't. So just start now. So
Yep.
like, that's kind of the attitude you have to have is, and that's one of the things I think that took me forever to start this. I'm like, man, we missed the boat on podcasting, and because this has been around for 10 years, however long this has been
Yeah.
around. But I was like, you'll never know unless you actually try. So his Z Dog's advice essentially was, yeah, just you can do whatever you want whenever you want. Don't let you're putting these limitations on yourself. But when he asked that specific question, I commented on the video. I said, it's always too late. I said, never go to medical school. Don't ever do it. Which I think he said jokingly, but there's a little bit of truth in every joke. I think he meant it. Like, don't go to medical school. He just, wasn't as adamant as I am. I would never recommend anyone ever go, no matter what age you are.
Mm-hmm.
But
What Shakespeare said, like the best truth is a half lie. And
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's difficult, it's tough, but I mean, if it's something that you really want to do, like Gage did with his life, go
thought I
for that.
wanted to do. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is- yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's very generic advice, right? But truly it is. I don't when people ask these kind of questions, I honestly I don't know what they want the response to be. They know what the answer is.
Mhm.
That person asked that question, they knew it wasn't too late to go to medical school. They're only 25. Even if you put it took me 14 years to do
Yeah.
radiology. So let's assume they do, even if they do primary care, they're going to do it'll be a shorter amount of time for them.
Yeah.
Like, the answer that still puts you at 40. You know the answer to the question you're asking. You just
Yeah.
want somebody else to kind of say it out loud.
Mhm.
So
People want reassurance from other people, and
yeah,
and I think when people say, "Oh, it's too late," yep, just stop. And they're like, "Okay, that's what I was looking for,"
yeah,
or if
yeah,
they say, "No, it's not too late at all," and you're like, "Oh, well, I need to find somebody else who's going to tell me who's going to
yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah,
justify me saying like it's too late," and they agree with
yeah,
me, and so that's the reason why I didn't do it. And so,
yeah. You'll find the answer you want
exactly,
eventually from somebody. It's just like you see a whole bunch of it's big now. People always want research, right, to back up an opinion, like vaccines cause autism, yada yada yada. You're going to find research to support your opinion, no matter what side you're on.
right.
So you're just going to keep bouncing from resource to resource or person to person until you get the answer that you want.
Mhm.
So you have to just know when you ask these kind of questions, I mean, you already know the answer.
Yep.
You just
And
want
like
someone else to validate it.
right, and like that terrible doctor that did tried to correlate those two vaccines that
Hmm.
cause autism
Hmm.
BS.
Yeah.
Like he found little things that just
Yep.
it's just BS. It's all garbage. But you can search BS and you will find it. Like you will
Hmm.
find lies if you search it out. And so yeah, yeah. Do what you want in this instance. Do what you want to do with your life, um, and don't worry about somebody telling you yes you're too old or yes you're this or
Yeah.
whatever.
I mean, you have to learn to block that stuff out. We've talked a little bit about it when I was, I grew up in a small town. Nobody really amounted to much of anything. So when I told people that I wanted to go to medical school, you could see the look on their face. They're saying one thing like, "Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you do great." But you can see they don't mean it. They're like, "Oh, you're not going to make it." Like
Mhm.
I even
Yeah.
had one of my high school friends. He married uh, someone else we went to high school with. They've been together forever. She admitted to me that she's like, "Yeah, I didn't think you could do it." And I was like, "I know. Like these people, yeah, these people say one thing, but I know they mean another thing. I can
Yeah.
see it in your face and your body language. You don't think I can do what I just told you I'm going to
Mhm.
do." So you're going to have people that doubt you every step of the way. Every step of the way. You
Right.
know, we've mentioned our upbringing before. My parents didn't go to college; they barely graduated high school, and
Mhm.
everyone's like, they look at that and they're like, "Oh, that's why you won't make it. Your
Mhm.
parents did this. You can't amount to anything." And
Right.
I'm like, if you stay in these settings long enough, you're going to believe it.
Right.
I
Yep.
didn't stay in that set. I left my town for college, and I never went back.
Mhm.
So once you get around, I think, kind of on a tangent, but you have to get people around you that, well, I don't. They think like you, right? They have to think like you, but they
Mhm.
also, I mean, they have to be able to check you.
Mhm.
You don't want yes men all
Yeah.
around you just saying whatever. But you
Right.
have to have people that are going to support you along the way. I eventually met those people that were like, "Oh yeah, you can do this," and I could tell that they meant it. And then
Mhm.
once you get you know, that those kind of people around you, you get some confidence, things get so much easier.
Hmm. Get people who believe in you, who are on the
Yeah.
same, who want to do the same paths, or trying to
Hmm.
better themselves, and they see
Yeah.
what you went through, and you just keep raising each other up. Like that's you find your crowd when you start like
Yeah.
getting out of
Sometimes you're not even looking for it.
Yep.
As residents, we spend a lot of time together, and I went to a small program. There was only like 15 of us, I think, at a time, but
Hmm.
12 in radiology. And then, I mean, you spend 50, 60 hours a week with these people. So
Hmm.
obviously you don't like all of them, but some of them end up being really good friends that you would have never guessed. I still talk to so many of the people that I was residents with that
Hmm.
I'm like, never would have get in my life. I never would have said you and I are going to be as good of friends as we are.
Right. That,
So
that's cool.
you're not always looking for it, but you'll
Mhm.
find it when they show up. You know, that's
Right.
kind of we're kind of getting into some like mushy garbage
Yeah.
here, but I feel like somebody needs because you always hear it from people that are already established, right? Like Joe Rogan could tell you what we just told you, and people are like, "Oh yeah, fucking easy for you to say, Joe. You're a billionaire," you know.
Hmm.
But when you hear it from people like us that aren't we're accomplished, but we're not nearly as successful as they are, or you're like, okay, you know, now it maybe sticks a little bit, or resonates a little bit more because these people are on my level. At
Hmm.
least that's how I felt. Like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
I don't want Ray Lewis telling me, hey man, you can do whatever you want. Easy
Well,
for you to say, brother. You're, a
yeah.
freak athlete that but I'm not saying he didn't work hard, but I think the message just resonates with people just like we mentioned it again, the Oliver Anthony, right? He's just an average dude just like the rest of us. He was in the woods when he recorded that. So
Mhm.
I think when people see you as like an equal or like they can see themselves in you, the message is a little bit more powerful.
And I think that gives them the step. They're like, okay, that average guy
Hmm.
did it. Like I can do it.
Hmm.
Not just LeBron, who's the freak athlete.
Yeah.
The average guy over there. If he can do it, I know I can do it. So
Yeah.
it,
And I
it
mean, I
really,
was the same way. I've met people along the way, doctors along the way that came from families of doctors. I'm like, man, your experience is not for me.
mhm,
It doesn't relate to me. But then I meet one of my favorite family medicine attendings was a dude that grew up in like rural Missouri,
mhm,
and he had the kind of a similar upbringing to what I had. I'm like, oh, okay, now you're telling me this stuff, you can do it, then I can do it. So it's
yeah.
not to discredit the work that those other people have done. I think it's just they're already there. So it's hard to see. We didn't see the process of getting there. I'm telling you the process. You can see my process of getting there. So it's a little bit more
And,
relatable.
and I think that even goes back to you're jumping aside, like you know, race, age, ethnicity, all those things. Like you see somebody who is the same 50-year-old that you are doing it
Hmm.
or doing the process of doing something. You're like, oh, okay, like they're fit. Like, or you see somebody even older, you're like,
Yeah.
you're 50 and you're like, I can't do it. And you see the 60-year-old that's doing it and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I can do it. Or you see somebody who's the same race or ethnicity or has that background that you do doing something and you're like,
Hmm.
okay, like, yeah, it's obtainable. And
Yeah.
so I think that helps a lot of people internally make
I
that
think
decision. Like,
the
yeah.
going back to that viewer's question, I'm
Mhm,
assuming they're having the issue that most people do, which is the first step, right? They were scared of the first initial step,
mhm,
which it never even crossed my going to medical school, like the risks never even crossed my mind. But it's easily the riskiest thing I've ever done in my life. Because now
mhm,
if I didn't finish, which we had several people that didn't finish, I'm hosed. I'm in debt. I'm not going to find, I'd be stuck probably an average job paying back that debt for the rest of my life, depending
mhm.
on when I quit. So I think I don't know if you did, but I definitely struggled with the first step in terms of making this podcast. And then that video that I did last night, I was like, man, I don't want to put myself on camera and edit and do all this other stuff. But
Uh-huh.
I think
Yeah.
most people are just scared to take the first step, and you kind of just have to do it.
The first step is always the hardest because that's like your leap of faith. Like
Hmm.
that's your like, okay, I'm stepping out of what's comfortable into something that's uncomfortable and I don't know what's going to happen. Am I wasting my time?
Yep.
Am I like whatever it is? So if you're able to take that, and I think sometimes that even like going to school, I look back sometimes and like even the education that I went through, I'm like, if I was my age now, like I think I know so much more than I know then. I'm like, would I have done that again? Like probably like, I don't know if I would have done it all again. Like
Yeah.
sometimes like the sleepless nights and the different things that you just were just like head down, just like doing it. Looking back, like, I'd have been like, nah, I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. Like, never mind. Like, but I
Yeah.
think I was too young and too dumb to know better.
Yep. Ignorance is bliss. You don't
Like,
know any better. You don't know any better.
but it was also like, it worked out, because I was too young and because I was too dumb to
Yeah.
like know better. And I think the same, not necessarily the same thing with the podcast, but like I've wanted to have this podcast for probably years, but like it just didn't work out with our schedules and things like that.
Yeah.
But like now we still like, not that we're too young and too dumb, but like we still went for it, even though like we have no idea how this is going to turn out with the
Yeah.
YouTube videos and the podcast,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, and so it's not just always that you're too young, too dumb, but sometimes you just take the leap, and if it fails, so be it. You've grown. Like with every leap, with every step that you try something new, there's going to be growth
Hmm.
of some sort, and learning. And so you take those wounds or things that turn out well, and you move forward. So
Yeah.
um,
So that's our soapbox for the day.
yeah,
That was
it's my
I did not expect it to go off on that tangent, but it did.
the soliloquy.
So when you when you listen to this podcast and you become rich and successful, make sure to shout us out.
Yeah, like, subscribe,
Yep. All the social medias. So
support, sponsor. Um, okay,
so we
and
have
so
one more. We've been meaning to talk about this one forever.
yeah.
So I've been an attending now for almost 2 months. So we were going to I can at least reflect on it's quick. It's crazy how quickly you lose it. I don't forget my residency experience, but it's already starting to fade because I haven't been a resident for, a year and a half almost. So I can relate it more to being a fellow, but being an attending is it's a different ballgame. And I can't compare it to other specialties, maybe except surgery, because radiology is unique in the sense that it's pretty much one on one, right? It's just me and the image. Nobody else is there to. So if you're an internal medicine doctor, I don't have a specialist that I can send this image to, right? Like I am the specialist.
Hmm.
So, when you're a surgeon, you're a surgeon. Like it's just you and the patient in that room, one on one. I mean, you have help, but essentially you're taking full responsibility for that patient. So that's one thing that people talk about when you become an attending is it's just your name at the bottom of the report. Whereas when you're a resident or a fellow, obviously you're attending, you dictate it and then they overread it and they final sign it. So they take all the responsibility for it. So you're kind of prepared for that eventuality. Like when you're an attending, you're by yourself signing. But I underestimated how much that pressure is. I assume it gets better as you dictate more, but just knowing that everything I can read, everything I do read has the potential for disaster.
Hmm.
Like for me, for the patient, for whatever. It's a lot of pressure
Hmm.
to handle by yourself. And you can ask your colleagues, like if you see something and you don't know, you're like, oh, what is this? But that's not going to hold up if you get sued, right? You can't be like, oh, Dr. X told me it was this. So I said, well, it's still your name at the bottom of the report, buddy. So
Yep.
that was one thing that I underestimated is
Pressure.
just the pressure. Yeah. And it's radiology. I think we've talked about this before, but it's hard to tell people, even in medicine, how busy we actually are, like to describe a busy day. But I mean, if I average 100 studies a day and I work, I don't know how many days a year, let's easy number of like 250.
Hmm.
You multiply those out, I have a lot of room for it to make mistakes. And
Right.
I have to do that every day for the next 20 years. So I'm sure there are studies out there and I've read them at some point, but I forget the number. A
Hmm.
large majority of radiologists at some point are going to get sued. And
Hmm.
it's not how good or how bad you are. Sometimes it's how bad you are, but it's just a numbers game.
Hmm.
The more I read, the more I'm going to mess up or I have the opportunity to mess up. It's just
Right.
like your job. The more you scan, the more you have the opportunity to miss or do something or whatever.
Right.
So it's not like I'm not a bad radiologist in my personal opinion, but it's just simple numbers, right?
Hmm.
Michael Jordan says I took thousands of shots in my career. I also missed thousands of shots. You're like,
Hmm.
so the more he took, the more he missed. He also made more, but he still missed more.
Right.
So to me, that was the liability and the pressure of being the one that is responsible for signing is is a lot more than I thought it would be, because I signed some of my own studies in fellowship. I signed X-rays and I did moonlighting, where I would sign chest CTs and PE studies and stuff. But
Mhm.
I never felt that. I don't know
Yep.
why. I just never felt the pressure in
Mhm.
fellowship. Maybe it's because it's a big university. So if someone sues you, they're likely going to sue the university and not you.
Right.
But I just never felt that pressure in fellowship. And I never had any issues in fellowship. No one ever told me anything about my reads being
Mhm.
bad or missing things or whatever.
Mhm.
But when you're in a private practice, job, it's just a different ball game. You're just on your own island.
And that's interesting. I think I forget that you're in a private practice now versus when you were in the big university. And
Hmm.
so those are two different aspects. You're being a radiologist, but you're a radiologist for different things. For a big university, private practice, and I don't even know if
Hmm.
there's I don't- other ways to be a radiologist too. I don't know, VRAD virtually, and so
Yeah.
those are
Well, they're still it's mainly private and academic. VRAD is private practice. They read remotely.
okay.
The only other thing I could think of is you can work for an insurance company, right? You could be the one that fucks over your colleague and says, yeah, they shouldn't have missed this, or yada yada yada,
Mhm.
approves the exam. So you can work for insurance companies, and stuff like that. But it's the vast majority is private practice versus academic, and
Mhm.
academic is different because not just for fellowship, but everybody there is only reading what's in their fellowship. So when I went to fellowship, all my attendings just read MSK, because that's what I trained in.
Right.
If you go to body, all those attendings, they did a fellowship in body, and all they read is body, neuro, so on and so forth down the line. So you're much less likely to get sued if you're only reading your subspecialty, because
Mhm.
that's what you're most comfortable with. But
Yeah.
in private practice, that's not an option.
Right.
You have to read things that are outside of you, that you read in residency, and you're good enough to handle,
Yeah.
but you're not subspecialty trained in those things.
Yeah.
And then that's where most people get into trouble.
Right. And
So,
I have a quick story about that. So I've
mhm,
worked with a radiologist that's first year, um,
mhm,
and they specialized in body, and you start to notice when you're doing different exams with them how uncomfortable they
mhm,
are with certain things. So like they had put this particular radiologist in breast,
yeah,
and, and you know it was just taking them a long time to get
mhm,
through things. They're like really going over things, and then they started recommending biopsies. They're like, we want to
yep,
biopsy all these nodules.
yep,
Whereas some of the other radiologists would be like, no, 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 we're going to do this, this, and this. And so the comfort level of first being new, they're getting put on an island of what they're not used to doing.
mhm,
And I think I didn't realize that, when you specialize, you for that fellowship, you focused on that's MSK,
mhm,
like I read, that's what and then you're like, okay, we know you've been doing MSK for the past year, 2 year, whatever, however long somebody's fellowship goes or body or whatever. Now we're
yeah,
going to put you in breast, or now we're going to put you in, but like whatever else specialty it
mhm,
is that you don't have as much experience on, ready, set, go.
yep.
And
And you can,
so,
yeah, you can tell, and when people are uncomfortable with what they're reading. But I mean, that's on us, because my group asked me if I wanted to do MAMS, and I said I will not
mm,
touch MAMS. So I
mhm,
think the radiologist has to kind of put
no,
their foot down and know
no,
themselves well enough to say I'm not
right,
comfortable doing that. Like
right,
I won't read like high level neuro. If it's like a PET CT comes through the ER, fine, but I'm not going to read high level. I won't read high level neuro, just like the neuro person shouldn't read high level MSK.
right,
Orthopedic surgeon doesn't want a neuro radiologist to read their knee MR, just like a neurosurgeon doesn't want me to read their brain MR.
right.
Post-op. Like so, we have to know ourselves a little bit better. But radiology's in a good spot, so you can kind of pick and choose. The job market's hot, but um, what else? So that's
Stay
one
in
of the
your lane.
things.
Stay in
Yeah,
your lane.
yeah, that's one of the things I wasn't ready for. Some other things I wasn't ready for are we have, I don't know what you, maybe coordinator, like a reading room coordinator, I guess is what you would call
Mhm,
her. She handles most of the phone calls, and then if it's a specific question, then she hands it off to one of us.
mhm,
So she handles a lot of it, but like I still have to call. We've talked about giving results. So if there's a PE, I have to call. There's certain things I have to call the provider about, and that, I mean, that's a pain in the ass to try and get a hold of these people. I'm in a stat study, so I think most radiologists probably do what is termed an oh shit scroll. So you scroll through the image first to look for anything that jumps out like immediately. Like if they have
quickly.
a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm that you have to call, like you have to call right then and there before you
Mhm.
say anything on the dictation.
Right.
So I think most of us do that. So if you happen to catch something, if I catch a PE on that scroll, I'm like, well, shit, now I have to call. So then it takes 10, 15 minutes, whatever, I have to find the number. I have to call. We cover a lot of rural sites. So you have
Mhm.
to find, either call radiology and have them transfer you to the ED or whatever. So that can take 10 or 15 minutes. Then you have to dictate the damn study, which takes another 10 minutes. So
Mhm.
just one study could take you 30 minutes. And when the list is 300 deep, you're like, oh my God, this is painful.
Mhm.
So giving results, like the interruptions, I guess, is how I would sum that up.
Yeah.
Phone calls, other providers wanting to talk to you.
Mhm.
You don't deal with that in fellowship very much because they usually want to talk to the attending. So they ignore you as the fellow. And
Mhm.
we had a reading room coordinator. She handled most of that as well. But the interruptions are crazy.
Yeah. And I can even correlate like quickly with the interruptions. We get for I've worked at different places where the radiologists have us call, and so
Yeah.
they continue to do their dictating, and we call the results to whomever. And so now we have X amount of exams, and we're making the
Hmm.
phone calls, and I'm answering the phone calls, and I'm also scheduling and trying to book patients on our schedule, which it's a full thing. So you're just like putting people where you can't really have time to put them. And
Yeah.
so if you have that coordinator spot, man, that's so nice to
Yeah.
have. I
She does
wish
help out a lot. Yeah.
you don't realize, and you don't realize how much somebody ends up helping out till like they take a day off or something. You're like, well,
Yeah.
where?
That's when you notice it.
You're like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
right after that,
We have to carry the phone that she normally carries. And you're like, oh my God.
like,
But
this is a lot. Yeah.
so, I mean,
Um,
I don't want to be all negative about being an attending. Obviously, the paycheck is nice. I'm not going to lie to you about that.
that's true.
So
Yeah.
that's what I've been building towards for 15 years, is that paycheck. So I mean that helps, but
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know,
Know your stuff, right?
yeah. So somehow I would say it every week, but we're at 42 minutes. So we're gonna cut my 2 months as an attending short, and I'll continue to add things as I
Yeah.
experience them. I have, when I work I work weekends in fellowship, but I haven't worked one as an attending yet. Then I got to work overnights, so those things will be things I can add onto my
Ooh, yeah.
discussion
We'll have a
later.
weekend segment and a night
Yeah.
segment, something like that. Night Hawk.
Yeah. So the last one is my favorite segment, and this question I've been sitting on for a while. I wanted to ask this like the first day,
Mm,
but we're gonna get a little deep here,
yeah.
and I love it. Dennis is, you can already tell he's uncomfortable, so we're gonna. That's how you know it's gonna be a good segment. But I don't remember where I saw this. It's a common question, so I can't take credit for the question. But here's today's question. You ready?
Go ahead.
Hypothetical situation, because neither one of us are in this situation.
True.
But today's question is, if you were married and your wife was pregnant and she was actively having, or getting ready to, or actively having the baby, but the doctor walks in and says, hey, one of the two is going to die during the birth. Which one are you saving? You saving your wife, or are you saving the kid?
Okay. So I think first off, hopefully this never happens to anybody.
Obviously, yes. This is
Hopefully, like
purely hypothetical. Obviously,
this
we
is
don't
a
want this to happen, but
this is a terrible like situation, terrible thing to happen. Strictly going because Gage is crazy and comes up with these crazy questions.
yeah.
Um, I would, I think for me, I think I would say I would save my wife at that point, just because. Also, scripturally, it's God is first, and then your spouse. And so going based on that, I would say save my spouse. It would be a probably the hardest decision that you've ever had to make in your life
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
because I'm
unfortunate reality is people have to make this decision probably daily.
right,
There are people that
right,
have to make this, and we're making a segment out of it. I don't. It's not a joke, but this is
yeah,
just like a segment I wanted to do. But
right, right,
so you're saving your wife because the
yeah,
big man upstairs
for
says
sure.
save the wife.
hmm
Okay.
I think that's what I would go with. And yeah, definitely, as Gage said, this is not a joke. This is just a
Yeah.
hypothetical. Like we come up with a quick question every week, and so this is just he wanted to go a little deep with this one and
Yeah.
want to see
I didn't realize we'd have the same answer. I thought you would go the opposite direction. But
No.
mine is for different reasons. I'm going to save the wife as well.
Hmm.
But mine, I don't ever want to be in that situation because I don't want kids, right? So
Right,
that's
right.
the easy
Yeah.
part is I don't want kids. So if I'm in that situation already, I'm behind.
Behind
But
that. Yeah,
I don't know why
with the wrong woman.
it's to save the kid. I mean, I don't know. It's different. I guess because you know the wife on a deeper level, right? Obviously, you're married to her. You know everything, most everything there is to know about the person, assuming it's a healthy marriage or whatever.
Hmm.
And the kid is just they're not even born yet. So even though you're especially the mom is gonna have an attachment with the kid.
Right,
I don't know. It just seems like the attachment with the wife would, for me, would be a stronger bond
for
than the
sure.
kid.
Yeah, I think that you know the person, you've probably been with them for a considerable amount of time. Not saying, obviously, the time with an unborn child is crucial and
Hmm.
is a beautiful thing. But when you have to make a very hard choice between two things, maybe the person that you've known for a longer period of time, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to justify the decision,
Yeah.
and also scripturally, um, that but what's interesting is also I feel like not had a similar conversation, but I had a conversation with a coworker that said, that was a female, that said, I would save my kids. Like, if anything happened,
Yeah.
like, if,
Yeah.
like, I think their hypothetical situation was my husband, they're both falling off a bridge, or some
Hmm.
crazy hypothetical, and they're like, I would save my children
Yeah.
because, like, I love, I'm all about my children. And I don't know if
Yeah.
that just says like they had a poor marriage,
Yeah.
or if they,
I mean that gets into another topic of you see all the time. Like, do you put your kids first or do you put your spouse first in a marriage? And
Mhm,
I think vast majority of people will put their kids first. But I happen to be on the other side of the spectrum in that I think the spouse comes first.
yeah.
So I guess that kind of is consistent with why I would save the spouse before
And I,
the kids.
yeah, and I agree with you in that situation too, because I feel like, you love your family as a whole, but I think you once your kids grow up and they move on and they decide to start their own family,
Hmm.
you have your kids, and then you have their family and their kids and your grandkids, but
Hmm.
you know it ends up being your spouse or significant other, and
Yeah.
just you two. And so you have to really have that deep love, caring for each other, to continue to live, your life past your kids. You go through all their sporting event, we got this
Yeah.
and this and this,
Yeah.
and now it's just you and your wife, or you and your husband together again, just the two of you. And so you have to, that goes along with, I think it's important that you also continue to date your husband and
Hmm.
your wife, throughout the duration. You can't just Life isn't just going to their kids' soccer games and things like that. Spend time with your significant other, go to date nights, and keep that connection, because one day your kids are going to move on and they're going to
Yep.
be gone, and they might not come and visit you often, or they might not
Yeah.
be around often. And so it's just you and your significant other. So make sure you have a good relationship with your significant other.
Yeah.
um,
I mean, I think yeah, that's the important. I mean, you mentioned dating each other and stuff like that. So
mhm,
I feel like if you have a healthy relationship, then you're probably going to be a better parent. Obviously, neither one of us are parents, so we're
mhm.
speaking
Yeah,
hypothetically.
for sure.
So if people that have this experience can speak a little bit better to it, but I feel like if you have a good relationship with your spouse, that's going to reflect on how you parent the kid. The kid is going to see that. And
Hmm.
then, because you see kids that grow up in unhealthy households, and it's just a cycle that continues
Yeah,
until, eventually, hopefully somebody breaks it. But
right.
it could just be an endless cycle. So I feel like if you put your kids above your spouse, that's when things start to fall apart. Not
Hmm.
to say there are times where the kids obviously come first, right? I'm
Hmm.
talking in the long run. If your
Yeah,
kid's sick, obviously they come before the spouse, or if something happens, whatever. But I mean,
yeah,
in the long run,
right. Yeah.
you have to have that bond, because like you said, kids are going to move out.
Hmm.
And if you're a good parent, they're going to be self-sufficient. They're going
Hmm.
to have their own family, their own job, their own life, whatever. And they're probably not going to, just frankly, especially in America, they're not going to come see you that often.
Hmm.
So then
Yeah.
you're stuck with your spouse. And if that relationship was built on sand, that shit's about to crumble real quick when it's
Mhm.
just you two in the house.
Right. Right.
So
And going back to, I think this goes back to, so, people postpone divorces
for kids,
for
yeah,
kids
yeah,
because their relationships are horrible, but we stay together for the kids, or whatever it is. And so,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. But for me, just to reiterate, God first, your spouse.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I'm
and
not God first, but spouse first.
I know,
So
I
that
know.
was a good question. I like those kind of questions because they're a
It's
little
so,
bit more. They force you to think a little bit. And if you for you and I, we have to put ourselves. Hopefully, everybody. I mean, statistically, not everybody, but everybody. Most people have to, I guess, put themselves in those shoes. Like they've never experienced it, right?
mhm,
If that was a reality for you, then that's not going to be fun.
yeah,
But I think when you can put yourself in the shoes for different scenarios, not just this one, but for any scenario, you can put yourself in that situation.
yeah.
One, it's fun to think about because it challenges you. Two, I think it helps you grow kind of as a person too. So
I'm curious, for any viewers out there listening. I saw 35% of our audience on
mm,
YouTube is female, and so I'm
hmm,
curious on, us being guys, do we have a different thought process
yeah,
than
that's a good
the women
question.
out there? And so if women
Hmm.
have thinking differently, or if a guy thinks differently for some other reason, like I'd love to hear why they think that way,
Yeah.
and maybe they can enlighten me, or I don't know. I'm always up
It's
for fun.
these kind of questions are meant to create discourse, right? Like you just want to talk about them. It's
Hmm.
just we
Yeah.
happen to be doing a podcast.
Mhm.
This is a question that I'm sure gets talked about in friend groups all the time,
Right.
right? You just don't discuss it publicly.
Right. Some
So,
sort of.
but yeah, the bringing up the female perspective would be interesting because I have a feeling that they would mostly side with your friend that
Hmm.
said they would take their kids. I think most females would save their kids as well. Whereas I
Yeah.
think males would probably tend to lean more towards
Yeah.
us. But we don't have kids, right? So we can't speak to the parent,
So, and I, and I,
the fatherly bond. So
right. And I think I saw a stat, like a random stat, that um, men, if the women, if I don't know, if you end up staying with your wife or your significant other for a long period of time and your wife dies, usually men die fairly after, where women can continue to like live much
yeah,
longer than men usually do, because it's like their best friend is like their wife or whatever. So they like,
yeah,
once their wife's gone, they're like, I've got nothing else. And so
yeah.
I don't know how accurate all these like things that I've heard over the years are, um, but yeah, these hypotheticals are good.
It's fun.
Good. It's fun. It's terrible. It's fun.
It's
Um,
meant to make you think and kind of
yeah, makes you react.
expose or let people know into your
Yeah,
thought process and all that kind of stuff. So
and be prepared for situations that you
yeah,
can't prepare for.
yep. Prepare for
So
the.
unpreparable.
That's right.
Well, here we go. Another 53 minutes in.
Good.
Uh, and I think we're wrapping this up. It was great. Episode 12. Get ready for episode 13, guys. Make sure you again follow us
Hmm.
on rad_talk_DG.
Hmm.
Send us an email, radtalkwithdg@gmail.com.
Yep.
Like, subscribe, sponsor.
Yeah.
We're,
So I'll plug it again. I briefly mentioned our YouTube. So rad_talk_DG is YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. But the YouTube specifically, I just put out a new series that I'm going to try called Radiologist Reacts. I reacted to Anthony Oliver's song Richmond, North of Richmond. So I think it'll be live at noon my time. So 1 year time, but it will be uh, just kind of let us know your thoughts. I've never done it before. I did the whole video by myself, edit it, and all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to get Dennis to kind of create something to as well. But so go give it a listen and let me know your thoughts and opinions.
yeah. And also, if anybody has any ideas of,
Mm,
what you got, radiologist reacts. If you have any ideas for me to
yeah,
have a segment.
ultrasound reacts. Yeah,
Oh, just yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We'll come up with something. But
Yeah.
all right, guys. Until next time.
All right, we'll see you next week, guys. Thanks.